So in this session, I will start from there, and then gradually we will talk about like how exactly we can manipulate HTML text, the pages using different components. So let's start with the comparison. So having said that, we will have comparison operators. Uh, Slightly when it comes to the variables in JavaScript, slightly different from if you take a language like C. So it's open, which means you can use any data type to represent the variable, keyword, var keyword. Now when you say check something whether it's equal or not equal to, so when you use the comparison, you use double equal sign. It just checks the value. Now for example, if you put a 5, the number 5 as well as string 5, it says yes, right? So let me quickly show you this as the first one for today. That will be the third the JavaScript one I'm going to discuss. So let me start with the JavaScript file. Let me open up with the notepad and also the file, and I will share this first. So this is what I have exactly right now. And then I'm going to share my screen. So this is my screen, and this is finally what we have discussed last time. Right now, the next one I would like to discuss today is the comparison operators, especially equal to. So let me rename this. Let me say this is my JavaScript third one. Let me put 3. Let's look at comparison operators. So let's use two values. The second one, I will put little is 10. Okay, so the second one is this. Yes, like this. What if you compare the two, right? So let me check these two by clicking two equal signs like this, right? So there I'm actually going to check whether there is two variables, but the content in two variables are the same, right? So ideally, if it is in the another, programming language, you might say it's not equal because you have different data, but this is actually treated very differently in, JavaScript. So let me save this. So I'm going to say it's Java 3.html, and let me save it, and then let me double click on it to show you what will happen. So make a note of this one. So I will open this, the third one, right? It says true, right? You will say true. Right. So one way to do this, so let's say we have something here. We will put, the values here. We have 10 and equal sign. Then if you put 3, so in this particular case, if you use 3, right? So for example, let me put another alert after this one. Just try this and see. If you put three equal signs, yes, another equal sign. So in that particular case, so this is the same one. So let me save it again, file, save. Now when you refresh it, you will see the first one will be true and second one will be false. So this is true and second one will be false. The reason is, in the second one, with three, you actually check whether the data type is also the same. So that's why you are getting that. Right. So let's move on to the next one. So the comparisons are important when you want to, compare the values. So not identical, we can say that's three. This is what I have actually described to you. So is they identical whether the two, the values are identical, which means the values as well as the data types, whether they are identical to each other, right? And the next one is whether it's not identical to, right? So if it is not identical to, that means you check both the values as well as the data types. So the others are similar, so I do not think we need to spend time on this one. So here are some examples which might we will get, right? Okay, so let's look at simple selections like in the other places in JavaScript. Also, we will use if, and within bracket you can have some condition, and we have curly brackets, and within that you can put it. This is the simple statements, right? So whatever the condition, if the condition meets, then you are going to execute what is inside this. And the next one is when you have two options. Now, for example, here we will have testing and we'll check, and then we are going to say, okay, you haven't changed anything, and then you have changed something, right? Now, for example, a very simple if statement, let's write. So let's take the fourth one. Let's say if statement. Right. So let me quickly save this as JavaScript 4. Let me share the screen. Fourth piece. Yes. Let me share the screen now. Okay, we have JS4. Right. We are going to discuss if statements. So here is the screen. This side we have, yes, we have if statement. Yes. Okay. Now simple ifs. Simple ones, you already know that. You can just say if, let's say, we can have some number. We can say, okay, we can say number. I'm going to say, okay, 5. And then we can have simple if. We can say number is greater than 0. Then we can simply say, okay, alert positive number. Yes, so this is the simplest one you can think of, having a simple variable, and then you are checking that variable. If so, you are going to execute this. Right, so let me run this, save, refresh it. So it says a positive number because it's 5. So let me rerun. When you put -5, then we didn't get anything because nothing is there, right? So the next one is we can improve this, right? So let me take another variable. We'll say num1, right? So let me put the changes. So in the same thing, let's change. So more advanced one. Else we can say alert a negative number. Simply you can call this. Now this time, if it is positive, it will say it's a positive number. So let me run, it says positive number, right? And let me put -5 here. So this time when you save it and when you refresh it, it says a negative number. So that's a simple selection. Right. So let's move to the next one. So this is exactly what we were discussing, comparing the if and else statement in JavaScript. So the next one is simply for loops. Loops, and most of the time when you want to iterate exactly the number of times that you want to iterate something, you can simply use this, right? So this is like a C syntax. Only difference is you define the variable as var in the beginning, and the rest will be the same as in there. So let's quickly just type something to explain this. So let me start with again a small example. Yes, we have this. Let me uh, create a file first. Okay. So the next one, we'll look at some loop statements in JavaScript. So let me save the file. So we, in this one, we will have HTML, and then let me save it. So this is the fifth file that I have created for this. Let me start now. Let me share the screen. Right. Now, in this particular case, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to create, several loops where we will describe, how things can be represented. Now, the simplest one would be, you simply, iterate something over and over again. Now, for example, we can have a for loop, and we can say I, you can initialize first. Then let's say it's less than 10. You want to represent 10 times I plus plus. So this will exactly run 10 times, isn't it? Yes. You can say alert. Yes. We can say IT509. So if I save it, and if everything is correct, I suppose I didn't make any mistakes. So having said that, let me save and let me refresh. So this should count 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? 10 times. Or you can just put I if you want to display I. Now, for example, let me run this again. File save. If you refresh it, it starts with 0. That is 1. Its scores should go up to 9, right? right? So 10 times, right? So that is the simplest loop we can think of, especially when you want to repeat something. We could have used this. And the same thing we can put, for example, working with an array. Now, we have not discussed this earlier, array, especially when you work with multiple items in array. So this is quite useful, right? So for example, um, let's say we have a set of items. Let's say we have a var, we have a set of items. So this is actually how we actually define an array in a JavaScript. And then we have bar and we said, so all these, let's say these are the items, right? And then now in this case, we want to start from the beginning, go up to the number of items you have. So instead of just 10, we want to get the length of this array. So we can say, okay, items, and then length will give you the length of this, right? And instead of alert, we can say items I. So this is actually simply the way we use. What you need to remember is the item length, and then sorry, this item I, because it start with 0 will be the first value, and 1 will be the second value, 2 will be the third value. So that's all you have, right? So if I save, let me refresh it. So first of all, it displays the first one, that is item 0, then item 1, then item 2, and that's all, right? So you will see that how we can iterate the things inside that array. Right. Let's move to the functions now. Let me put functions. So in this case, I will briefly look at how we may create function in JavaScript. Let me save this as JavaScript Lab 6. Yes, and then let me get this. Okay, so here we will look at the function handling. So in this one, you can have, the functions already available, like alert, right? So this is alert, we have already know how to use it. Yes, alert, whatever you want to print, you can use it. Already we have seen this. Yes, this is possible. And then there are like other things as well, right? Now, for example, we can use, you can simply, you can date, right? That's there. So that's the date. We can simply, you have to create an object, and then you can actually use this, right? So that's possible. And then other things like pass int, changing the values, right? Let me explain this one first. So this is what we call the native functions, already available functions available. So let me save this first, and if you refresh it, you will get this as the message. So let's say this, I think what we have done earlier, let me create a variable. and then num, but let me assign it as this. Now, you know what will happen? So this is a string, but yes, you have a numerical value, but that could be changed, right? So there's a function called pass in. Now, for example, we will check, again, we will say var. Let me say number one, or we'll say inum to say that it's an integer number. So we can have pass int, and then we can say num. So what happens here in this function, right? It's a numerical value, right? Now let's check this. Remember the checking alert. We can check whether the num equals num inum. Yes. And alert, we can check num. Is it identical to inum? Or you can just check alert num is now inum, whether it's identical to 10, like this. Yes, let's see what will happen now. When we save this file save, and what will happen when you run it, first it will display IT509. So this is what we have. This will output. And then what happens, we have, 10, and pass it is actually converts to int, right? So this converts to int. This is what will happen. So when you click it, this will be 10. Num is string 10. Inum is 10. It says true because it's the same numerical value. But if you check whether it's identical, it will be say no, false, because num is string value and inum is an integer value. Now the next one is we check inum, whether it's identical. It says true. You will see. So these are known as native functions, right? So these are what we call the native functions. Yes, alert. Yes, and then pass int are native functions. So it's already available in JavaScript. Right. The other one is actually we can create custom functions, the functions you need, right? So the next one is actually you can create your own functions. We call custom function. Now, for example, we can have a very dumb function called foo. So the keyword is function, and when we say foo, and then we have brackets to indicate that it's a function, and then you can do whatever you want to do within this function. So let's say we are going to have alert. So like this. So what happens there is you can call it. Now when you want to call this, now this is the creation, you can just say foo. That's all, right? Let me refresh this. Now it will run from the beginning. So this will be there, right? Once we that, it will go to foo, call this, and it should display this. Yes, we have a function just right? So that's the functions. Now, when you come to our functions, then we also have to talk about the arguments. So you can actually, pass values in between. Now, for example, let's say you want to add numbers. So you can use those, right? Um, so let's say we want to, look at the array size, right? So let me, comment out all this. Okay, another simple one. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a simple function to find the length of the array, right? So for example, I'm going to create var test. So I'm going to create an array. So you remember arrays are within brackets. So it's a num array. Yes, we have this array. Let's say I want to create a functions to calculate the number of elements inside the array. So let me create that function first. Function, we can say alert array size, right? Whatever the array, when you are giving, so that's we take it as a parameter, right? Input parameter. So you pass the parameter inside, so it will take it as the input, and then within that we will use alert to indicate the length. We have seen this earlier as well. Length. So length will give you the length of this. So this is the function creation. Now we can call this. Yes. Can you tell me, send me in the chat, how do you call this function now? Now we have the function, we have the array. Can you type, how should I call the function? Can you send me the answers in the chat? So how should I call the function? It's about this test, right? So this array and this function. So how should I call the function? Yes, exactly. Yes, Shanika said, Krishna, yes, we can just call this with the function name. Good. We can say alert array size, and then we can pass test. So hopefully if you have done everything correct, right, we should get the answer. So let me rerun, so it will take from the beginning. We have a couple of things. Yes, yes. Then the second function call, yes. Third, it just say 5. Why it is 5? There are 5 numbers in it. Right. So now let's look at the variable scope, right? So variable scope. So let me take a new file for this. Let me save as. So let me use J7. And let me open up 7. So let me remove everything because I'm going to start from the beginning. It's 7. And I want to discuss variable scope. Yes. I'm typing something like this. Yes. Tell me which one is okay. Huh? Right. Let me first of all open. seventh one. So this is what we are going to do, right? So in this particular case, I'm going to look at the variable scope. That means when you have functions, we have a different scope. I hope you already know this, the concept. So let me create a function. No, we will say, okay. Oh yes, we'll create a function. We can say function. Uh, we'll say add one. Yes. And then what will happen there is, let's say, var a, we define like this, and then a equals a plus 1. So let me say this is a, add 1, then let me put, we can say, so I'm calling this, right? So let's put it in this way. So if that is the case, what will happen? So let's run and observe first. So we will save this and we'll refresh. First of all, it's 0. Then again 0. Yes, that means you already know what is outside of a function. So this A is a globally scope, whereas this A is locally scoped. So this A and this A is different because of var, right? But if you remove this, yes, let's remove this and let's save it. Let's refresh it. So it's 0 and then it becomes 1. Did you get that one? Or do you want me to explain again? Have you got this? So here is, okay, I will share the slide first. I think we better discuss that. So the under variable scope. So this is what I want to discuss, right? So when you say a variable that can be used of any script in your pages, we call global scope. Right? Everywhere we can use a variable. But if it is within some function, then we call it a local scope. Now, whatever the variable, if it is outside, then it's global scope. I think that's common. But if it is within the function, right? And you want to visible only to that function, then var keyword is necessary, compulsory, right? And if you do not, if you want to expose it to the global scope, then you will remove var keyword, right? So that's what exactly I have done. Now I think I can display it again, right? What we have discussed. So here is what I have, and here is the output. So what it says is, if you do not define it var keyword here, right? Then it will update it, right? So let's run again. So it will first display 0. Now you call the function. Once you call the function, you have changed. That means this is visible to the outside. But if I change this, let me change this. So when you say this local, right? If you use this, if remove, then A becomes global. You see, this is how exactly it will work. I think we have to put this here. It's local. If remove var, then it becomes a global. Yes. So that's you need to remember, right? That's how the variable scoping works. Right now, if you run this, you will see you will get 0. So that's 0 here. And when you refresh it, even if you call this, because it's visible only to within this, there's no change to this A. So you will get 0, right? So make a note of this one. Right. So when you want to access a particular element, when you want to double it, we can use as it is, right? So for example, let's say we are going to double a particular number. So we can write this. So let me show you again. So another function. So let me type it here. Function double. Let's say input is some number, and what we need to happen is we are going to add this 2 times, which means we are going to double the number, and then we return the value, right? So let's say we define its var total. So when you define var outside the function, it's global. So if you define it, it's global. Right. Now, if you get var number equal double 20, so what will happen? You said 2020, isn't it? And then finally, we will make it alert. So what if now there's no var identifier within this? So what will happen? It's interesting to see, right? So let me save, file save. Let me refresh. So this is the first one, 0 and 0. Then you will get 40, isn't it? Now the total becomes 40. How comes? So first of all, it was 10, isn't it? It was 10 here. It was 10. But when you say double 20, since you actually used num, that 20 goes here, 20 plus 20, that's 40, it's total. So there's no var keyword here, right? Because of that, we'll get 40. Okay, small change. Put var here. Now things will be changed. If you put var, then what is outside is slightly different. So you have 0, 0, it's 10, no change. So remember, when you put var within a function, then it's local, right? So there's a slide actually, we discussed this under variable scope, and the next one, this is exactly what we have discussed. If you have a variable with var identifier, if it is outside the function, the scope is global. If there's a var identifier but within the function, then scope should be local. And if you have only the identifier value inside the function, then it's global. So keep this in mind. So when you work with the JavaScripts. Right, now I think we have discussed so far many things, right? And then we want to look at how you are going to use this. Right, so the alert we have already discussed. So the output data in alert box in a browser window, that we have seen, small box. When you want to confirm, we can have yes and no dialog, which means user can click on yes and no. Console log, you can write information in the console, especially we will use this for the debugging. Document write, very important one. From this point onwards, we are going to look at it. We can directly write HTML document. Prompt, we can get user input, right? So let's see how these things work. Right, so let me quickly show you a couple of these functions, how we may actually work with JavaScript functions. Right, now in this one, I will take another window. So let me first of all create the files for you. So I will start with the server, and then let me save it as is the 8th one that we are going to look at. And then I'm going to save it. Let me open it. So in this one, what we are going to do is other functions. So I will explain the common functions. So here are the common functions that we are going to look at it. Right. Okay. Right. Now let me share the window now. So this is what exactly going to do. Right. When I'm actually explaining, if you are new to JavaScript, maybe I highly recommend you also try the same time. And if you have any questions, please raise in the chat so that I can answer. So the alert we already know. So let me talk about the document and write. So we can look at how we could use this, right? So let me start by looking at the document write function. In this particular case, we can display anything the way you want. We can use document and then let's look at small one. So we'll start with, give me a second. So what I want to explain is the document.write. So we should use document.write. We can add things to the document. Now let's say we will have things like this. Right. So the scripts are here originally. So that's there, right? So let's see, right now what we have is only JavaScript. So what if we put this document.write? So I told you like document.write will add HTML tags to the document. So let me put this here first and see how it works. Document.write. Let me say IT509 web technologies. Yes. And we already have JavaScript there. See how these two works together. Let me open up the file we have already discussed. Yes, yes, yes. And then I'm going to save this first. Save, refresh it. Okay. Now you'll see what has happened. So this one will come out. Here you will see. And then already what we have is a JavaScript here. Right? Without this one, let me remove this for the time being, commenting out. We will only have this. Yes, we will only have this. When you say document.write, so this will not add up to the, yes, so this could be a very interesting one. So which means you can actually manipulate the web page, right? So you could use this to manipulate the web page. Right. Now let me add, as headers. So let me put H1. So I will put this as a header one document slash H1. So if I refresh it, you see that, so this is represent as a, level one header. Yes. Let me type another one, document.write. Yes. We can say, let's say the paragraph. Yes. So you can put it like this. So if you refresh it, now you can see how the values are arranged here. Yes. So it's an interesting one. So this is a one thing that actually we have discussed. Another one is alert, getting user input, right? So getting user input. So let me use this. Then now we have discussed this one. Another common one is getting a prompt. So let me show you that one as well, right? Let me show you that one as well. So in this particular case, yes, we have these two. Let's get the person's name, right? So let me take, someone's name. I'm going to get first we will display what we want to show it to the user. Yes, what is your name? If you do like this, what will happen if you refresh, you know that there will be a question, right? And then let's say I'm going to use a prompt. The function is prompt. Uh, and then you can ask, something, enter your name. So let's see what will happen here. So refresh it. What's your name? Okay, so this is the difference. When you come to prompt, it'll expect something from me, right? So let me put my name. Let's say my name is Sampath. Okay, that's it. Nothing will happen. But if you want to keep it for the next one, so I can use it. Now, for example, I can say name. Yes, I will define as var name. I will get the value, put it into name, and let me alert. Yes, let's see whether it will work, right? I'm going to say hello. So let me, right? So it says, what's your name? And then you have a alert, prompt box, enter name. Let me put Sampath. And it says, okay, hello, Sampath. Yes, and interestingly, if you want, you can put this value into down in the page as well. Now you get this value. Now instead of putting this alert, I can put it to the document. Let me say like this, document dot write. So this is a string. So string concatenation, I will put it here. So I will /p like this. Yes, and the bracket. So let's see how this will work now. So I'm going to refresh it now. I'm getting the name, enter name. So let me put Sampath, and hopefully it says hello Sampath, and go to the document. Now it says hello Sampath here. Now you see now the manipulation of the page. It's interesting, isn't it? Okay, small question for you to try something. So you can take about 10 to 15 minutes. As a group, I will put you into, let's say, 3 groups. So here is a question. First of all, let's type the question, right? So the question is, get 2 numbers from the user and display the 2 numbers as well as their addition. That means the total of the 2 numbers in the document. Right now here I have got the name and I displayed the name. So likewise, the task is given to you as you take 2 numbers from the user, right? Find the total of the 2 numbers and display it in the document, the body of the web page. Shall we start? Okay, let me type it in the chat first. So you can take down this. Okay, group work. Take 2 numbers from the user and find and display in find the total of the two numbers and display the numbers as well as the total in the body of the page, right? So I'll give you about like 10 to 15 minutes to work as a group. And then after finishing this one, you are supposed to submit this, right? You are supposed to submit, right? As a simple group work. Right, now let me put into groups. So let me put in the breakout rooms. Automatically we have 15. How many rooms? Let me have 3 rooms. There are 5 each. I want you to everybody interact in the group work, discuss among yourself. And if you have any questions, you can talk to me even or chat me, and time to time I will come into your rooms as well. So let's start. Yes, Shashi, why don't you join? Natuni?
Okay, this is the codes. Do I need to explain it, sir, from
Yeah,
the beginning?
not to me, but for the others. Can you please explain to them what you have done there?
I'll create two variables. First variable is to get the first number, and second one is to get the second number. And then I pass those variable to the numeric function called passing, because if we didn't pass this one, it will take it as a string values. So I took it as a integer value, and then I get the addition and assign that into a variable. And then both things I printed in the body section by using document.write.
And demonstration as well.
Number one and number two, and this is the output.
Okay, thanks, Shanika. And volunteer from the other group.
So this is my code. Hello.
Yep, we can hear you. We can't see the code, we can see the web page.
Okay, sir, wait. So this is the code. First, I will get the first number and pass into pass int function and convert into the integer value. Then second number also convert into the integer value. Then I get the variable called total and add number one and number two to the total variable.
I think what we see
Then
is something else. The code is something else, right?
wait. Okay.
Okay, now we
Okay.
can see. Okay, thanks.
Okay. First number, I will I get the pass convert into the pass int function and convert into integer value. Then so number two also convert into the pass int function and convert into integer value. Then I get a total variable and add number one and number two to the total variable and get the total value of those numbers. Then first I write the number one as my page in using document.write. Then print number two in the page. Then print total is n number one plus number two and total value of both numbers. I will show the program, sir. This is the running program. Enter the first number and second number. Those are displayed in the page.
Okay, thanks, Viku.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I think you are comfortable with the basics of JavaScript, and it seems that most of you already know this. So maybe I can quickly go through the next session step. So let me share the next few the slides. I would like to discuss what we have discussed is the common functions for the output, and we considered some of them in the group work. And then after finishing this one, I will put this as a assignment, so you can submit it separately, right? The next, let's look at the browser object. In JavaScript, we can access the browser window itself. That means you can change the URL, or you can open or close the browser window, right? And in JavaScript, this is known as window object, right? So there are like several, properties, methods can be used. Now, for example, event represents some state of a particular event, and history, it's the whatever user visited earlier could be handled with the history, and the location, URL in the address bar, we can read and write access, status, alert, close, confirm, focus. So these are like different browser properties and method you could use. So the idea there is you can actually work with the browser window. Then the next one is the handles, like depending on like different events. We talk about what events is. Now the event is some kind of an action. For example, when you click on, when you move mouse over something, right? And then this event should be identified. Now to identify the event, you have to have something called the event handler, right? Now, for example, some event handlers are on blur, which meaning when the element lost focus, you go from one element to another. So that particular place where you loses the focus, we call on blur. And on change, now, for example, in the text space, we are trying to type something. When you're trying to change the value. On click, that means you are trying to click a particular object. On error, right? So if there's an error in the document, or like when you load an image. On focus, so earlier we have on blur, you lost focus, and then you are getting a focus, we call on focus. So likewise, we can actually identify various event handlers, and based on the event handlers, you can make different functionality. Now, when you want to apply the event handlers, you can handle it many ways. You can handle it as a HTML attribute, or you can handle it as a method, or you can use add event listener function, right? So these are the three ways that actually you can handle an event, right? Now, for example, let's start with the HTML. Now, if you put something like in the body and with the on click attribute, so there we will use this as attribute, and we give out a function. Whatever the function will happen whenever somebody clicks on the body, right? So when somebody click on, says whatever inside the function actually get executed, right? So that's a simple way of representing the event handlers as a HTML attribute. The next one, as we discuss, is the method. That means you can use some helpers. Already we will have, for example, window dot on click my function. Whenever somebody clicks on the browser window, then my function will get executed. Or else you can use anonymous function. Now here we will see a function there, we will write at the same place. Instead of using a name, we call anonymous function. And I hope you are familiar with the concept in other programming languages as well as. So whenever user clicks anywhere, whatever inside this function within bracket will get executed. The advantage is it's very simple and easy to maintain, but only issue is this is binding only one event at a time, right? So it's not common, it's just particular for one particular event. Third one is we call add event listener. So you can use multiple binding on a single object. For example, you can add listener and then specify the event and the function, right? Now, for example, let's say we want to apply something to the window. We can say window dot add listener, and then we say the click, that's the event, and then you have the function. So we will have my function, right? So here the click means actually on click. If you remember the list of event handlers we discussed, we had on click, on blur, and so on. So we actually omit the preceding on here. Same way you can define the function in the same place, like anonymous function, like earlier we discussed. As an anonymous function, you can put it as a function E within bracket. You can put the code to execute whenever somebody clicks on the window. Right. Now we'll look at very useful functions with, especially when it comes to forms. Now, right now our focus is for developing educational software. So most of the time you have a data storing, data retrieval, things like that, and you are getting the data from outside, especially through forms. So one of the extensive use or most popular uses of JavaScript is whether user has entered correct values to those forms. That means we call form validation. Now, for example, length of the information, like if it is, let's say, phone number, we know exactly there should be 10 digits, whether user has entered the 10 digits there, right? Exact match of type information. Sometimes there are particular way that we need, for example, like let's say the date, we have some syntax, the way we should, type a date, so that we can actually check. And sometimes we can also check whether user input email correctly. Right? We know that, right? We cum your, right. Then at in the emails, so usually you know that email can be recognized using the at mark, whether it's there and whether that particular format is also there. You can check both. And then when you have different types of visual elements like radio button or checkbox, whether this has been selected, right? You have some cases you have to select. It's compulsory that you select a particular answer. So that kind of a validation you can do. And the remaining slide, we are going to look at how we could perform those. Now, for example, text boxes, emptiness. Now, how validation happens there: when you try to move the focus from the text box, you can check whether it's empty. Now, for example, so in the input text type text, that's what we will use normally. And let's say it's a name, the ID name we have given. And on blur is when the lost focus, we need to execute this function, right? So the validation, simple validation is you check the length of this value, right? So you get the document element by ID. I will get to this later on, get element by ID if you're not familiar. So in that particular case, we are going to get element by ID with the name, and then whatever the value there, and you check the length of it, right? So if the check the length is less than one, then we can say that it's empty, isn't it? So you check whatever the value we entered, the length of it. And if it is less than one, means there's nothing in it. And then you can say, okay, you can provide an alert. That means you can inform user to, force to enter something, right? So you can modify. I think you have already seen that sometimes when you fill a forms, you will get some, alert in red color, right? In with the form object. So this actually happens with the JavaScript. Next, look at the text boxes, right? And let's look at a particular value. right? Let's say again, when you are lost focus, let's say we are going to look at check value, particular check value. Now again, uh, let's say we expect some value there, right? The problem might be sometimes users might use different cases. So that's why we get the element saying that name and the value. So we are getting the value from here, and then you convert into lowercase, and then we will check with the expected value. Right? So this is just to make sure that whether these two are the same. And if that is the case, yes, if they are both the values are the same, then we can take a message that the entered value is okay, right? So make a note of this is very important. Either you convert into lowercase or uppercase. So traditionally we used to use lowercase for comparison. Okay, another one, validating email address. Right? In this particular case, we are getting the element by ID email, like input type text, ID's email, and the value, and we'll get converted to lowercase, and then we are index of this particular method. Actually, we will use to get where that particular character is there. So -1 is not, it's not there. So simply we are checking whether the at symbol is there or not. If it is equal to -1, that means there's no at sign in here, which means it will not be a valid email address. So usually we can say it's an invalid email address. Okay, so likewise, check in checkbox. Uh, so we can check whether the text box has been clicked and hide or reveal different parts. Now, for example, here, if document.get element by options, and then you can say checked, it should be true. So if that is the case, then you can display something. Now, for example, depend on whether you are a male or female, you can provide more options, right? So likewise, you can show different values, different items in the form based on user input, right? So that's possible. Okay, now when you talk about looking at or manipulating the whole body of the tags in a HTML page, we should know how to represent this as actually a tree, right? So this DOM or document object model we will give us to manipulate how the document. So there will be a structure, and we can identify what we call the node tree from here. So what you see here is in the left hand side, you will see HTML document, and right hand side you will see the equivalent node tree, that the DOM model, right? So why do you need this? Is you need particular way of accessing each element here, so you should know how to access them, right? So in the exam also sometimes I will give you something like this, and then you are supposed to draw something like this. Now, that if you go from the beginning, that we start with the HTML, and the HTML structure such a way that within that you have both head and body. That part we already know. And within head, we have two tags. We have title and meta tag. So that's what exactly we represent here. And within the body, if you look at very carefully, we have two divisions, div, and then within the first one, we have H1, level 1 header, and we have a paragraph. So within the paragraph, we have an anchor, that means a link. Whereas in the next div, you have another paragraph, so which will actually end up this node tree. So let's look at how you can access it, right? Now, when you look at different elements, the DOM, when we say, you have element nodes, right? The paragraph, anchor. Then, so these are element nodes. We have A, right? P, these are element nodes. Then we have attribute nodes. Some attributes are there, right? href. And then we have text nodes, right? We have text nodes. So we have p element, we have a element, right? And then we have set of attributes like a href. It's we have attributes, and then the remaining ones are the text. Right, now let's look at how you may access it. Now I told you, once you know the node tree, you should be able to access any element, because when you want to especially manipulate, you should know how to manipulate them by calling, right? That exactly particular node in the node tree. Uh, so there are many methods, the properties and the methods you can actually access element. Now let's look at the page, that means a document. So when you look at something, you start by looking at the page, which we call the document. So that means this represent the page. And then relevant element, right? With ID value beginner. So here we will look at the particular element. Usually, if you go back to show you some elements that we have discussed. So we discuss couple of elements when we write, the values. So, okay, so maybe here, right? Oh, right here, we have ID, right? So with that one, we can access it, right? So this is possible. And then it will find the HTML content that in HTML and save those content to a variable foo, right? So we will get whatever within this, the inner HTML, that means HTML content within the element. That's what we mean by inner HTML. And then we'll put to foo. Right, then you can element by the tag name. Now, for example, within the document, you can element tag name, that means P. So the retrieve any element by the tag name. So whenever you have paragraphs, you can access, put it into this parameter. So in this way, actually what happens, you access all the paragraph on the page. Then you can get element by ID, that we already know this. If you have ID like this lead photo, so you can say, okay, document dot get element by ID lead photo. So you can actually access that particular element. So that's possible. So these are the methods for accessing nodes. Then, sometimes even in CSS, we discuss defining the classes. So you can actually get the element by class name, right? If you have a class attribute. Now, for example, here document dot get element by class name, column name. So which will put into a variable called first column. And query select all, it's based on CSS style selector. Now, for example, remember we use classes with dot, right? So for example, we want to access some child element. Here what happens is query select all dot sidebar. And then within the sidebar, if you want to access within it, so we can put sidebar paragraph. And if you want to based on a particular attribute, right, query select all input that type text. And the next one is get attribute. Now let's say sometimes you want to get some values, attributes. Now let's look at HTML tag imgsrc. We have this JPG file, and then we have an ID, right? And then we will say var big image and document get element by lead image, which will mean, right? So you will get this, right? IMG SRC. So when you want to say the value within the SRC, so you can say big image dot get attribute. And here we will put the attribute name src. So then it will actually output the value within this attribute. So in this particular case, it will be the image name. Right, now like we access it earlier, right, you can manipulate the nodes. Now you can change the values. For example, you can set, now in previous one we had a lead image and we had a different image. You can change that view at SARS to a different one. It will change, right? And then sometimes you can change the content within a particular markup. So intro, for example, get element class by intro. So everywhere within this is our intro text. So that part you can actually change. So that's possible. Then let's say you want to modify or remove CSS type, right? So you can take, for example, document get element by ID intro and the color information, style color. Within the intro, you have style color. So you can change the value. Likewise, you can change the background color, right? So use of style there. So at the same time, you can create and remove elements. So you can create new elements. Now, for example, to create a new element, we can say var new div, document created div, which will create this div, right? And this will be added to the document. So likewise, if you want to add a text, we can say, okay, create text now. Then let's look at adding and removing elements. So append child to add a node newly created to the DOM. Now here we will look at example for append child. So it's a div ID, our div, and this is a div. So this is the HTML code. Then you will see here what will happen, the JavaScript code, where we will get this div element through the div ID, element by ID. So which means you access this one. And then you create a new paragraph. You say create element P. And then you say copy, create node hello world, right? And then we will say copy. Now this hello world, we are going to add it to the paragraph. So that means we append child copy. So that is the text that we are going to add it to the paragraph. And then paragraph is going to add it to the div. So this is append child to the div. So in that one, you will see how you may use this. Right. Then there's another element that you can discuss here. It's insert before. The idea there is you can insert element before another element, right? Now here is we look at an example. So we have div ID, our div, and then paragraph ID, our paragraph, and we have div, right? Now let's look at the JavaScript code. So first of all, you get the our div. That means this is the one you are getting. And then you are getting the paragraph. And then let's say you are creating a new header. So create element means you are creating a new header and we call it the new heading. And then you create a text node that is a heading and that you append it to the head, right? Then if you want to add this before to the paragraph, because we have already identified this, so we can say our div dot insert before. So basically the idea is that H1 we are going to insert before this paragraph. then replace child. So you can change one node with another one. So let's look at this. We have div id, our div id is swap me div, and within this div we have another one. Now we'll get first one, this is the second one, then we create an image, and then we set the image to the src, and then you are going to change with new image to swap me, right? So the new image, replace the child new image with the swap me. Then removing elements, remove child. So this is actually could be used to remove entire branch or a one node from the document tree, right? So for example, in here we will have divide parent and divide remove, and then we have a paragraph within that. So first of all, we get the parent node, right? We will get the parent node by getting this. So this is a parent, and then you will get the remove me, right? And then from the parent, you are going to remove the child. So whatever inside you can remove, and this is called remove, right? Okay, so I think that's all we have for today, the theory section. One of the main thing that we have discussed is actually form validation. So I want you to work on that for the project that we are working on. For all the interfaces that you use for data insert, you should improve those interfaces with the validations that we have discussed. So some of the validation you can actually directly use, others you may have to find out exactly what kind of a validation you need to have, right? So the remaining time you can work together in a group, right, on your projects. And especially today I want to focus on the validation part. Okay, validation part. Okay then. So then that's all for today. Next week, I will look at some frameworks where we could join what we have discussed so far. Now we have basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I think now we could look at, briefly look at some of the framework available with, instead of using a plain JavaScript, it will be easier with the frameworks available. Okay, any questions you might have before we finish for today? Okay, so I'll be uploading the note as well as the video, and then also I will create a link to update the assignment, right? Okay then.